Hi, I'm Christopher Warnock of Renaissance Astrology, and today I'd like to talk about Cazimi and combustion and our new Cazimi Moon talismans. So when we talk about Cazimi and combustion, in fact, we should also mention under the sun's beams. These are three states that a planet can be in relationship to the sun. And in fact, they're part of a much larger cycle I call the orientality cycle that has to do with the retrograde and direct motion and then how that interacts with the sun. So planets will go retrograde and then combust and then be in front of the sun and behind the sun, et cetera, et cetera. This cycle was developed in Arabic astrology, which in the 8th and 9th century was a synthesis of Persian, Vedic, and Hellenistic astrology that then basically these genius astrologers created and then transmitted to Europe. And that's traditional astrology. Medieval Renaissance astrology comes from this Arabic astrology. Now, one of the interesting things about medieval Renaissance and Renaissance astrology in particular is that they're kind of simplified. And so a lot of the real complex techniques have been kind of cut down and we don't use them as much. So the Cazimi and combustion are something we definitely do deal with. And so I think someone's going to come back and dive into this orientality cycle. Now, for example, the simple definition we use is that, and this is from Lilly, is that if a planet rises before the sun, it's oriental. If the planet rises after the sun rises first, that's occidental. So that's, again, the very much of a simplification over this very complex cycle, which actually has a lot of nuance and information in it. So somebody's going to dive into that, as I said, and probably become an expert in that. But for now, let's just deal with these pieces of technique that we still use in the medieval Renaissance astrology. So as I said, they're in relationships between the planet and the sun. The sun can never be Cazimi or Combust because that's the one that's the relationship to. So when a planet is within 17 degrees of the sun, it's considered to be under the sun's beams. So I don't actually use this very much. This is somewhat of a weak affliction, similar to combustion, but you're pretty far away. So again, I don't consider it to be a significant affliction, and I really don't take it into consideration. But we're getting closer and closer to the sun. You're starting, in a sense, get burned up. That's what combustion means. And so according to Lilly, if you're within 8.5 degrees of the sun, then you're combust. Now, an interesting issue here is that one of the things that Lilly says is that you have to be in the same sign. So you could be 1 degree away from the sun, but if you're not in the same sign, you're not combust. Now, I don't follow that. I basically just go by degrees. This kind of keys into that whole issue about out of sign aspects and things like that. And my tendency is to focus pretty much on the distance and not worry too much about what degree the planets are in. Now, that comes into consideration in terms of essential dignity and things like that. But rather than, my tendency here is I see people sort of ignoring it, like it's a way of erasing this problem. I mean, yeah, you're close to the sun, but we're just going to ignore that because it's out of sign. The logic to me is that you're close enough to be combust. It doesn't matter what sign you're in. And there's other reasonable ways of doing it. I'm not going to insist that my way is correct, but that's the logic behind what I do. And I use that both in combustion and in out of sign aspects. So combustion, 8.5 degrees of the sun, the effect of that typically, and similar, this is again from Lilly, is two things that I sort of look at when I see combustion in a predictive sense. First of all, it's definitely an affliction. It's a serious affliction. It's up there with being retrograde. And so it's obviously going to be problematic for electional or astrological magic to have a planet be combust. In fact, in my view, that knocks it out. You pretty much are not going to be able to use that for any kind of positive or benefic talismans or bringing things about if the planet's combust. In a predictive sense, like in a horary chart, when I see a significant or combust, that tells me that the person or thing that's signified, first of all, it could be hidden, or there could be things about it that you don't know. For example, if you were looking for a job and your significant is combust, it may be that you're not able to see, or that maybe, I think even more likely is that the employers can't see you. The other thing it shows is stress and anxiety. And the Lilly says that particularly stress and anxiety from a person in authority, which makes sense because the sun naturally rules people in authority. You're really close to it. It definitely makes sense that, you're being freaked out by your boss or, like I said, someone in authority. So that's combustion. Now, interestingly enough, like anything else in traditional astrology, it seems like even though it's generally considered to be an affliction, there's a silver lining. that there's always some nuance, there's always something useful about these things. So one of the things that Guido Bonatti says about combustion or under the sun's beams is that if you have the moon and she's going from combustion or going from being under the sun's beams, that she's hidden, and so that's a good time to do something in secrecy. So you would like to have the moon dignified, say in Taurus or Cancer, or exaltation or a sign, going from combustion, going from being under the sun's beams, and that's a good time to do something for secrecy. And we'll see that later as that keys into our talisman in terms of the invisibility. So, as I said, 17 degrees for under the sun's beams, 8.5 degrees for combustion, and then 16 minutes for Cazimi. Now, Cazimi means in the heart of the sun. And 16 minutes, it's very, very small, is about the size of the disk of the sun. So basically so close that you're actually covered by the disk of the sun. So this is very different from combustion. Combustion's burned up. It essentially takes away the strength of the planet. It's a severe affliction with these indications because Cazimi is different. What Cazimi does is really powerfully increase the dignity of that planet. And so there's some very interesting passages. Now, if you look on the Cazimi Moon page, you can see a link there on the YouTube page. There'll be a link to that. It has a lot of quotes about Cazimi, particularly from Picatrix. And Picatrix again talks about the cycle of the moon, and then indicates, the very positive effects of the moon being Cazimi. So, for example, it says that it again, as it goes through the cycle, the moon's orbit, it changes this elemental cycle. But it says, as it conjuncts the sun, it has a fifth quality, which is better than any other quality of the moon and is more powerful than any of her aspects. And this, it says it's better and stronger in all their works for that, if you elect when the moon is in Cazimi. And it says, when the moon is conjunct with the sun, she's completed her work, which is diminish what is in excess and increase what is deficient. So there's this incredible balancing effect, and it really does. The moon's, if you think about the general meaning of the moon going through her monthly cycle, it's that orderly change, growth, growth and death, the waxing and waning. It's all very tied in with agriculture, growth, and all that sort of stuff. And it's sort of our main, in a sense, timekeeper, so to speak, of growth. And so anything that we want to grow, anything we want to increase, anything that's in that sublunary realm is going to benefit from the moon being Cazimi. And so there's a lot of interesting stuff you can delve into. So take a look at that, deeper indications there of what Picatrix says about Cazimi, because it has some really interesting philosophical views and deeper understanding of the fact that being Cazimi is a very strong dignity. Now, one thing about the moon being Cazimi is the moon is moving so quickly, it's very, very difficult to get the moon Cazimi. And when I do Cazimi moon talismans, one of the things that I insist upon is that the moon needs to be in Taurus or Cancer so that the moon is well dignified. So not only are we're starting from a place of strong dignity of the exaltation or the sign, but we're then punching that up with Cazimi by catching that brief time. It's actually a very short time that the moon is Cazimi that we have to make these talismans within that time frame. So I think people have gotten interested in Cazimi recently. It's one of those things like fixed stars that there's sort of this knowledge has arisen about. It's gone from being this completely esoteric topic to something people are aware of. And they really are understanding that Cazimi is a very strong dignity, and they're getting more and more interested in it. And so what I would say about these talismans in particular is that these moon talismans, we've got a great new design. I'm really happy with it. Sort of the sun united with the moon. These we call alchemical talismans. They've got on the back the three alchemical elements of mercury, sulfur, and salt. And really, I think this fits in with this whole idea of the union of the sun and the moon. If we think about the standard duality, the sun is the ruler of the day, the moon is the ruler of the night. They really have together, there's this incredible transcendental unity, there's a sense of divine unity about that, and then also the alchemical elements together all point to that transcendental unity. And I think that's really one of the underlying things that's very intense about the Cazimi moon, is that any planet is going to benefit from Cazimi, But the sun and the moon, because of their archetypal qualities, the union of the sun and the moon is, again, very intense. So again, there's a deeper philosophical and spiritual energy and symbology that goes along with this, and then also the reality of the fact that they're made when the sun and the moon were united so closely. So in terms of the Cazimi Moon talismans, and I think one of the thing that's most popular about them is the invisibility quality, and so like I said, as Benatti was saying, when you've got a planet that's that close to the sun, it's blotted out, you can't see it, and so it imparts this invisibility. Now again, this is real. This is not Harry Potter, so it's not like you've got a cloak and then the electron, the photons are somehow bent around you. To me, this is more psychological. It's a bit like camouflage, and if you think about camouflage, the thing is readily apparent, but you can't see it because it's blending in so well, and I think that's really what the effect of this is to help you blend in. So people very often are looking for this. It's I think part of a protection talisman that is exciting for people is that this is a way of sort of disappearing. And I think that particularly had people ask about the government, for example, but I think it's useful for anybody that you're trying to avoid, enemies, protection, or whatever, is to have that ability to basically just sort of disappear. And so one of the things about Cazimi, I've had people ask me about this, and it's something that I did follow, but that's something I haven't been as explicit about, is that I think that the state of the sun is significant. I don't think I would want to be doing a Cazimi talisman with the sun in Aquarius or Libra, his detriment or fall, because then the sun is afflicted. And so when we're doing these, I would avoid those. So if I'm going to do Saturn, I'm not going to want to, I'll probably want to do it in Capricorn, but that's not a problem. The same thing with Venus. I'm going to do Venus in Taurus if I'm going to do Venus Cazimi. So, and as well with these talismans, we're able to get the sun and the moon Cazimi and rising, so that's even more powerful. It's with the fact, as I was mentioning, that the moon moves so quickly, it's very hard to get these placed, and sometimes we just have to do Cazimi. On occasion, we can add other factors in, like we typically would like to have rising or culminating, or the planetary hour, say planetary hour of the moon. But really, it's a bonus to be able to get the rising. So we've got the moon Cazimi in Cancer. So again, super strong for the moon. The other thing I would say about these is that these have all the normal powers of a moon talisman. So they're good for safety, for health, for growth, for protection. Also for, like I said, increase of anything, increase of wealth, for example. So, and essentially with the Cazimi, they've been punched up significantly. So beyond just the normal, what we'd expect from +5. So in many ways, really exciting talismans. It's, again, a brand new design. We've never done this particular design, alchemical design, before. We haven't been able to have these for a while because it was so difficult to get the election. I mean, it will typically be a couple years before we can do them again. So I'm very excited about him. If you're looking at this video too much after, this is October 2021, they're probably not going to be available. We're also having supply problems with COVID. So again, we don't have as many of these as I would have hoped to have. So definitely something to take a look at. And I think what's interesting about it is take a look at the page. You can read more about Cazimi. Definitely these are popular because of the power, because of the invisibility and protection powers that they give. But I think it's really worth delving deeper into the whole idea of Cazimi, and particularly, like I said, this sort of transcendental union of opposites, showing the unity of the one overall. I think is very intense. So I think there's as well as having these, practical effects that are positive, I think it's also very interesting from a spiritual and philosophical standpoint to be working with this energy of these planets. I mean, typically when we do a talisman, we're going to do one fixed star or one planet. This really is a planet of both the sun and the moon and the union of those. So the energy is very interesting to work with, very positive, very unusual, and something that we're very happy to have here at Renaissance Astrology again. So check out those talismans, check out the stuff about Cazimi, and I'm sure you'll find it very interesting.